medyo natatakot na ako.
This happened at work earlier. I was writing a memo to management, and I was the only one in that part of the workplace. To my right is a fire aisle with 3 rooms on both sides. They are mostly storage rooms, used to store equipment for the overnight cleaning crew. On both ends of the fire aisle are huge double doors. One end is an emergency exit, while the other end is simply an entrance. So there I was writing the memo when I heard this rhythmic pounding from one of the storage rooms, and a bit of shuffling. I then thought, oh, the cleaning crew's here already. I keep hearing it for about 10 seconds when it occurred to me I should have heard them come in through the double doors. By now, I'm a bit scared. I slowly stood up and listened. I could clearly hear the pounding and shuffling inside one of the storage rooms. It sounded like someone was nailing something against the wall. I slowly walked towards the fire aisle and just peeked down the corridor. I could still hear it, but part of me was saying, it's just the overnight cleaning crew. You were so busy writing you didn't notice them come in. As I walked slowly down the aisle, the noise stopped. I eyed all the doors of the storage rooms. They were all left ajar, and I could see the darkness through the cracks. That did it. I didn't go any further. I went out and asked a co-worker if she could walk with me through the fire aisle. I told her what I heard, and she said it's probably the cleaning crew. I just stood by the double doors as she walked down the fire aisle and opened all the doors. The sensor lights inside the rooms turned on. No one's in here, is what she said. I quickly gathered my things as she waited for me. As I was doing so, the overnight cleaning crew burst through the double doors. Now living in California, I was from the Philippines. These are just some of the lesser supernatural things that happened during my early years in the Philippines. My family owned this really old house, and like most old houses, this one was known to be haunted. One night our housekeeper was walking down the hall when she saw a woman dressed in white and was sort of glowing. The woman went down the stairs and walked through a door. Once she passed the door, our housekeeper ran to the door and opened it. It was a closet, but no one was inside. My mum said she was changing my diapers. Yeah, I was that young. After she took the dirty one off and reached for the clean one, she looked back at me to put the new one on. However, I already had one on. My cousin and I were in one of the rooms inside the house. On the wall there was a picture. When we first saw it, it was in black and white. We just looked away for about 2 seconds, and when we looked back, it was in color. I wasn't seeing things. I know what I saw. Strange things continued to happen even after my family sold the place. The new owner turned the house into some sort of hostel. One day a guy came in after having a great time at the bar. I can't remember how exactly the way this went, but I think the guy saw this white, sort of glowing object over his head. Last I remember, he just passed out. It was probably the woman our housekeeper saw earlier. This story was told to me by my friend. It happened in her old university. I wouldn't mention the name of the school in question, as this is a true story, and the school is ready to take legal action against it. Apparently, one student unfortunately died in this story, and it is a matter of assuaging the pain of the family and people involved. This story you might have heard somewhere, with a whole lot of different versions, but this would be the true version of it. My friend and I went to the same high school, and by the 4th year, last year of high school in most Philippine schools, we applied and got into different universities. My friend was taking nursing, while I was in business accountancy, and with this we lost time to hang out with each other. She would often just text me that she cannot meet with me on most days, saying that she had to finish a bunch of homework. I said to her, why not do it at home? But she said, jokingly, that she would only feel tired knowing that her bed would only be one staircase away, and laugh. After our 3rd semester, I really never heard from her. I simply took it as her being busy and such. I was almost to the point of feeling rejected and forgotten when all of a sudden I got a text from her on my cell phone. She just went, "You free tonight?" To which I felt a bit uneasy. She's never called like this. That night, I called her and asked where she wanted to meet. She said she's on her way to my house. She arrived after a few minutes. She got out of the taxi and simply went straight towards me. At first, she hugged me tight, and to my surprise she started crying and sobbing violently, as if something really troubled her. I tried comforting her, but she would not want to be touched and would shove my arms whenever I did. This really freaked me out, thinking that maybe she lost it. After a while, she mustered her strength to talk, but I could hardly figure out what she was trying to say, as she kept on sobbing from time to time, until finally she managed to calm a bit, with occasional sobs and sniffs. She then relayed this story to me. I was on a night shift at school trying to catch up with our thesis. The instructor was a bit of a pushover, so I had to stay late in school. Fortunately enough, 5 of my classmates were lagging behind just as much as me, and decided to do a group effort. But after a while, I had to go to the washroom to freshen up. I washed my face, and when I turned to look in the mirror, I saw a skinny, dark figure, and it leaned its face, exposing it in the dim light. It was hairy in the arms and chest, and its face was skinny. I noticed 2 black spots on its bald head, which then appeared to be tiny horns. It flattened its lips, turning them into a grin, and it started to utter some sort of foreign language I couldn't understand. I immediately broke down and cried and held my palms together to pray. It reached out its hands towards me, to which I yelled, "God, God, rescue me," and it vaporized in my sight. I quickly ran out, not closing the door behind me, and kept running. I turned to look, to see if it was after me, and I bumped into somebody. I quickly turned my head to see who it was. It was a Jesuit priest. He then picked me up and placed his strong hands on my shoulders and gave me a sort of sense of relief, only to be horrified to death when I looked up and saw that he was grinning at me, and his face became that of the demon I saw in the washroom. I ran, waving my arms violently like a lunatic, until I reached my classroom. My classmates all rushed to me as I ran out of breath, crying without any sound, as my vocal cords have given up on me during my horrifying ordeal. Starting to cry as she ended her story. I was just glad to see my friend safe. Unfortunately, a similar incident happened in that same university a year before my friend's unforgettable experience. The student was found by faculty teachers, lifeless and pale on the floor with her eyes wide open, just outside the washroom door. The same one my friend was telling me about. She was rushed to hospital. Many students who saw her being carried in a stretcher claimed that her arms were stiff, bent close to her chest, and her hands and fingers were all crooked. her head fixed, as if looking upwards. The school head doctor claims she died of natural causes. The family held a Catholic funeral for her, but never said anything about her death. The funeral being in the expense of the school. Rumors started to circulate that the school, being one of the richest in Manila, gave the family a large sum of money for their daughter's tragic loss. The school went as far as enforcing its legal wing, saying that whoever speaks about the nature of the passing of the girl is in danger of libel against the school's untainted reputation. My friend never told her story to anybody in her school, let alone me. I come from the Philippines. This is a true story that happened to a friend of mine when I was in college, back in 1984. We lived in a men's dormitory called Coop Housing, which is about 3 kilometers off, but still inside the UPLB campus. The residents walk to and from their classes because there's no transportation that goes to the dorm. It was built beside a hill, and not very far away one can see the enchanting Mount Makaling. One day while walking back to the dorm, my friend John crossed paths with a very beautiful girl who's carrying some green mangoes to sell. He was so enamored by her looks that he decided to buy some mangoes and tried to befriend her. She seemed quite kind and friendly too. Since then, and for several weeks onward, he would invariably see her in different places in the campus, or on his way home, and whenever he could, he'd buy a few of her green mangoes, which he came to acquire a fondness for. Not more than a minute did he think of anything unusual, since she looked like an ordinary girl, but for her attractive features. However, whenever he would tell the other guys about his new friend, nobody seemed to know or have seen her anywhere in the campus, so this intrigued him a little bit. One time, he saw her again at the lobby at the Department of Agronomy, wearing the usual white blouse and floral skirt he'd seen her wear before, along with some native bracelet and necklace made of twine, bamboo, and leather. So he made some conversation with her and tried to ask a few questions about where she lives and whether she goes to classes there as well. He only got curt and vague replies. She said she just lives very close by and yes, she's also a student. After this conversation she left him, and one of John's friends happened to pass by, and so he asked him what he thinks of her. To John's surprise and amazement, his friend replied that he didn't know whom he's talking to because he just saw him alone earlier, and even wondered why he's so animated as if talking to someone else. This definitely sent goosebumps all over John, but he didn't say a word. The moment of truth finally came one Sunday afternoon while John was sleeping in his room in Mount Isarok, one of the 8 housing units that make up the dormitory, named after the mountains in the Philippines. He dreamed of the girl again like always, but this time it's as if the dream was real. In his previous dreams he'd been making love to her, and this really turned on his manhood a lot. But this time, she finally revealed who she was. The guardian of the barren mango tree across his window. She took a liking for John and offered him to become the prince of her domain. He was incredulous and politely turned her down. But this made the girl, now transformed into an ugly-looking woman, very mad, and she started dragging him to come with her. John screamed at the top of his lungs, and this startled his dorm mates. They went to his room and tried opening the door, but it wouldn't budge. In the meantime, John was trying his best to open the door from the inside, and this went on for several minutes. When those outside were finally able to open the door, they were shocked to see John looked as if he'd seen a ghost, and aside from scratch marks on both of his arms, They also saw hand marks on his neck, as if somebody tried to choke him. He never saw the girl again. By the way, the girl's name was Mirasol. When I was still in the Philippines, my parents would take me and my other siblings to their home province in what you can call the countryside. We always loved going since it really marked the beginning of summer vacation. Away from the city, away from school, and most of all my other cousins. And our clan is huge. So huge that these vacations really turned into family reunions. We, I guess you can say, have a house there, our ancestral home, where my great-grandparents and their parents, and maybe their parents as well, have called home. But the happy togetherness feeling is not what my story is about. And here is where things start to turn, let's just say, weird. On that year, sometime in the mid-90s, not all of my cousins were vacationing. So it was just a few of us. On top of that, it was a wet season, rainy to stormy most of the time. We were inside the house, unable to play outside due to the heavy rains. And if you were a Filipino kid who grew up in the 90s, you know very well about the blackouts or brownouts, electrical failures that happens during stormy weather. So, as we all expected, a brownout occurred. We children then hurried to light the candles and oil lamps to illuminate the sudden embrace of darkness. This would always turn into a very good opportunity to start sharing ghost stories. Now, I've always been a scaredy young girl, flinching at the slightest squeak or any small sound from a dark corner that I could not readily give an explanation to. My cousins enjoyed scaring the wits out of me when there were brownouts back then, and their stories were so ghastly that the images that they conjured in my mind were just too real. Well, on this particular night, I asked that they do not make their stories so horribly scary to the point that I could not go to the washroom without somebody accompanying me. They would chuckle, but agreed. Then we decided to start our storytelling session. My eldest cousin was the master storyteller. He really knew how to build the right atmosphere that he can really make all of us scream and run for our parents. He has this uncanny ability that he waits for the perfect opportunity and setting, sometimes not saying a word till it is dead quiet, harnessing the sounds of crickets, dogs barking from afar, trees whistling in the dark of night, that sometimes I wonder if it was all coincidence, or if he really controlled these anomalies. As the rain started to lighten, slowly and slowly, until not a single drop were to be heard, my cousin told us to listen as he tells his first story. It was about a young woman who was about to get married, who happened to be a resident of our town, Barrio, back in the days of the Spanish occupation. This woman was thought to be the most beautiful woman in town, that men from neighboring towns and even provinces would come visit her for a chance to woo her and perhaps win her heart. She was also congenial, never turning away a suitor. It was said that she had met with all of her suitors during the time, and this only helped spread her identity farther. Until one day, a single man showed up in front of her house. It was a local town farmer, of about the same age. He was simple, yet humble, hard-working and religious. She immediately took a liking to him, to the dismay of most of her other suitors. One of her suitors happened to be a powerful Spanish plantation owner with direct ties to the church, and another who was a Spanish officer. They conspired to get rid of this simple farmer, and they did. They took the farmer down to a nearby lake and was said to have shot him in the back of the head and then left him floating on the water's surface. Upon learning this, the woman was very heartbroken. so much so that she drowned herself in the same lake. A lake that happens to be not far from our ancestral home. To make things worse, before her tragic end, she was said to have vowed to never bring peace to the lives of the descendants of the 2 Spanish gentlemen responsible for killing her beloved farmer. And then, my cousin suddenly mentioned, today happens to be the anniversary of the day she died 300 years ago, and in case you didn't know, we have Spanish blood in us, and we live close by this lake. Think about it. That quickly sent chills up our spines. Me personally, I could not move from where I was seated. But then again, I thought, it was just a story. After this story was told, my cousins decided to get some water to drink. Then, from the dark living room, only lighted by one candle, I saw somebody emerge from the left approaching me. I squinted and recognized that it was my mum, wearing her sleeping dress, duster as it is called, and she sat not far from where I was seated. That is when my other cousin decided that she was thirsty and got up, leaving only me and my mum in the living room. My mum then said she'd like to go outside as it's hot inside the house. Believe it or not, even after a long day of heavy cold rain in the Philippines, the 30°C weather still lingers, especially inside people's homes. I then thought that would be a good idea since I too felt kind of hot. The terrace was just outside, although the seats were going to be wet, so I knew my mum wouldn't want to sit there. Inside, I could hear that all my cousins had come back from the kitchen, and they were all calling for me. One of them asked where I was, and I yelled back that I'm outside, on the terrace, and they started calling me to come inside. My mum then looked to the lake. After hearing about the story, I asked my mum if the stories were true. I was surprised when she nodded, thinking my mum couldn't possibly believe in such stories. She started walking towards our garden, which is, strangely enough, the direction where the lake is. The flowers were in full bloom, especially with all the rain that we'd had lately. And at that time, I also felt like checking out the beautiful red roses that were fully in bloom. My mum glanced her head back, and I caught a glimpse of the side of her face that would be etched into my memory. Just blank white for eyes, and her mouth stretched to her earlobes and began to smile. That is when I woke up from what seemed to be a stupor and heard my cousins hysterically shouting, "Christy, hurry!" Before I could make sense of it all, I just instinctively started running towards them, and I began to cry when I realized I had walked outside the confines of our house, and it was halfway towards the lake, and, to make matters worse, I was being followed by what seemed to be a floating white dress. I did not bother to analyze who or what it was. I just kept running towards my horrified cousins, who, from inside the house, were peering out the window. I then recognized my sister, crying while shouting. When I got inside the gate, apparently I got the gut feeling that I wasn't being chased anymore. My aunt's dogs were suddenly baring their teeth, growling to whoever or whatever was behind me. Being a religious family, the gate was also adorned with crosses. By the time I got inside, we all heard the most sinister laugh. A laugh that I suddenly remembered as I write this story. Not something you'd want to hear, believe me. I continued crying while all my other cousins came to me, reassuring me that I'm safe now. It was such an unforgettable story that every time I recall the event, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I did not hear my cousins yelling? Hello watchers and listeners, thank you all so much for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share with the channel, please send it to my email. It's found in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel memberships are now available with custom badges and emojis. Only one tier at the moment, but more will be added soon with more perks. So feel free to check that out if that sounds interesting to you. And as always, the biggest thank you to all of you. I truly appreciate all of your support throughout the years. And remember,
Papa loves you.